Hello, in this video we'll go over how to do an ecological sampling activity in a desert ecosystem with middle school students. My name is Arisbeth Ibarra Nieblas. I'm a graduate student at the University of Arizona and I'm getting my master's in environmental engineering. Doing an ecological sampling activity in a desert ecosystem relates to SBAR since it deals with arid lands and its plants, soil, and water. And also relates to environmental stewardship, and it deals with conservation, management, and use of natural resources. When speaking about broader topics, this activity can be used for students who are learning about life science, and they can learn about abiotic and biotic factors, about flow of energy in ecosystems, and interdependence of organisms. Also for students who are learning about climate change, this activity is an environmental monitoring activity and also deals with conservation of natural resources. For this activity, we'll need the following materials: a notebook to take notes on, a pencil, measuring tape to measure the height of plants or other things that we can find on our site. Also a desert plant guide with the typical plants found in the area. Also a soil pH meter or pH strips, and also a quadrant. We found ours in a craft store and it's meant to frame canvases. Some background related to the activity. In 2010, scientists estimated that there are 1.9 million saguaros in the Saguaro National Park in Arizona. Only 20,000 saguaros were measured back in 2010, and math was used to estimate the total amount in the park. Ecological sampling is done because it is usually impossible to count all plants and animals present in an area. Ecosystems are influenced by abiotic and biotic factors. It is important to monitor both when doing an ecological sampling. The abiotic factors that we can measure in a desert ecosystem are location, temperature or weather, soil pH, also soil color or soil texture, and sunlight exposure. So plants are partly shaded by bigger plants or rocks that should be accounted for in the ecological sampling. The biotic factors that we can measure in a desert ecosystem are plants, animals or insects, and any other animal activity like burrows, nests, even feathers of birds or scats.
Hello, my name is Melissa Wilburn. I'm a 6th grade general education teacher at Quail Run Elementary School in Tucson, Arizona. We decided to do a random sampling measure of our ecosystem. We used a random number generator in order to section off all of our habitat area. This will help eliminate bias as you're going through your process. You'll number each one of your sections of your entire sampling area and then randomly assign which quadrants are going to be measured. In order to do the ecological sampling, before going outside to collect all the data, students need to have 2 different data tables in their science notebooks, one for biotic factors and one for abiotic factors. Students will then go out to whatever desert habitat area you have at your site, and they will lay their frame down in their assigned section. The pH meter will need to be in the soil, and students will be permitted to start collecting their sampling. It's important to give students plenty of time to collect all of their data and reminders to look for the abiotic factors that they might not see visibly. The phone is an important piece only for looking at the weather or for the GPS location, but this is information that can be provided by the teacher. Also important is the fact that wherever your quadrant is, you only measure those elements that are inside that frame. A good rule of thumb is if a plant is less than 50% within your frame, it doesn't get counted. You can also look at the root or the base of the plant And if the base is inside your quadrant, you should count it. If it's outside of the quadrant, don't count it. Once students are outside, they can begin their sampling, looking at all of the plants, all of the elements, evidence. It might not be physical, but they might see some footprints or something in the sand. After collecting all of their data, then you return to the classroom to collect a classroom data table in order to see the differences between each one of the quadrants compared to the class as a whole. So some discussion questions you might have would be, what does one quadrant look like compared to the entire class? Why is one quadrant different from another quadrant on the other side of your sampling site? What are some of the differences in the plants? Were there differences in the evidence of animals that had been in the area? Also, it's very handy to have some kind of a plant identifier as was listed in the list of materials so that students can actually compare what they're seeing outside to the actual image of a plant, because some weeds might be mistook as a cactus or some other kind of vegetation. It's also helpful to have some kind of a footprint identifier so that as students are looking at footprints maybe that have been left in the sand, they can compare that to a chart and really identify the animals that have been going through your desert area. Arisbeth and I have done this lesson twice with our 6th grade students. The first time we did it, we didn't have the quadrant frames, so it's entirely possible to do this activity without all that equipment. We simply took yarn and sectioned off the area that we were going to be sampling. We still did our random number generator. We assigned students a specific quadrant, and we conducted our sampling that way. It's also very important to remind your students to either stand outside their quadrant or in their quadrant but along the edge. We had many students the first year we did this activity who sat down in their quadrant and couldn't count those biotic and abiotic factors because they were sitting on them. For more information about this activity, you can find the complete lesson plan at the SBAR project site.